The controversial history of Mount Rushmore. Mount Rushmore may pay patriotic tribute to arguably the best presidents of all time, but the table of its construction isn't rife with sugar, spice, and everything nice. In fact, it's quite the opposite. It goes down in history as one of those things that requires great sacrifice to accomplish, even if that sacrifice is at the expense of others. So sit down and strap in as we take you on a ride through memory lane and the controversial construction of the national monument, Mount Rushmore. When Don Robinson first thought up his idea to create a mountain sculpture that would transcend time, he did it to bring more tourism to his state alone. That was the main goal, at least. As the father of Mount Rushmore pushed ahead with his project, it developed into something much more symbolic of not only his hometown state, but of the whole country. In other words, he saw an opportunity to make a mark on the country for good and for future generations to come. While Don was a fantastic project lead, he didn't have the artistic capability to accomplish his goal. That's when he reached out to artist and sculptor Gutzon Borglum, who at the time was working on another monumental project at Stone Mountain, Georgia. The amazing work he was accomplishing there gave him the idea of Mount Rushmore. After they communicated, Gutzon was well on board to be part of the project. Despite the increase in attention the project was getting, neither of the men knew how big the iconic monument would be for the country. After scouting many areas that would be the canvas for his artwork, Borglum eventually settled on its current location, whose rock faces were as clean and smooth as any artist could have asked for. The mountain's composition of granite, which is extremely slow in the erosion process, helped solidify this monument for the ages to come. After pulling some private investors into the project, Congress eventually agreed to match funding of $250,000 to see the art piece complete. With everything in place, from money down to the materials used, the duo was ready to begin the sculpting process. Sculpting started in 1933, where it eventually became part of the National Park Service. Borglum did not like having government bodies oversee his work, but he chugged ahead either way. He poured blood, sweat, and tears into the project until he died in 1941. Left at the decision of the government entity in charge, it was deemed complete in October of 1941 and cost a whopping $1 million to finish. The monument was deemed complete and ready for dedication on October 31, 1941. The eventual cost was nearly $1 million, which, when considering inflation, amounts to around $19 million today, a whopping 1,700% hike. While the project was rife with positivity for the country's people, much controversy and heartbreaking tragedy that went along with it were covered up. Mount Rushmore might replicate the faces of the greatest presidents in U.S. history, but its construction and commissioning speak of very different ideals these very men stood up for and spoke out against. First off, the chosen spot was considered sacred Native American land, and they did not give authorization to the U.S. government to begin constructing, but they did so anyway. Before it became known as Mount Rushmore, the Lakota indigenous people called this once gorgeous natural formation Tunkasilla Sape Paha, otherwise known as the Six Grandfathers Mountain. It was a place for spiritual practice and serenity for the native people that once prowled the Great Plains. The mountain's location in the Black Hills was also significant. According to the tribe, the mountain that was stolen was the center of the universe. It was a place of spiritual worship and where three different tribes could meet, gather food and herbs, and be at one with one another. When Rushmore was complete, it tore the three tribes apart and any faith the Native American people held in the U.S. government. To them, the U.S. would come and steal whatever their heart desired, so as long as it furthered their agenda. In 1868, the U.S. government signed the Treaty of Laramie, which gave the Lakota people exclusive use of the Black Hills. Unfortunately, the U.S. broke the treaty with the construction of Mount Rushmore, and the indigenous people were powerless to fight back. The construction location was full of controversy and has brought many protests to its borders even today. Perhaps the most appalling secret of Mount Rushmore's construction lies within the artist himself. with ties connecting him to the Ku Klux Klan on his George project. This stealing of land and imposing of local values were all the more horrendous to those who knew. A professor at Iowa State University who has studied its construction and history extensively says it's clearly theft concerning the U.S.'s own laws. Apparently, the U.S. can break its own laws, so as long as it's for the benefit of the few in power. To be fair, Borglum quickly cut ties with the organization in Georgia before Mount Rushmore. He was an artist trying to get commissions. The one he had accepted in Georgia was by a KKK-run organization. According to the organization, they are the ones who fired Borglum for his offensive egotism and delusions of grandeur. Suppose terrible people like the KKK say things like that about a person. In that case, he is either really awful or acts against the organization's best efforts. The truth is a little hazy, and the proof that Borglum himself held these same ideas is lacking. After being fired, he destroyed the Stone Mountain models and fled the state, so the organization couldn't use his work any longer. This was when he jumped onto the Rushmore project. When Robinson finally pitched the idea to Borglum, those ideas of grandeur he had in the past suddenly came bursting from the surface once more. This was his chance to create his magnum opus, and he wasn't going to let anyone get in the way. Borglum had a different idea from Robinson's initial pitch of the piece. He saw it as an opportunity to give testament to American exceptionalism. He was adamant that the art depicts presidents that have played a vital role in the country's expansion. Going through the list of perceived great people, the duo decided on the 4 presidents for particular reasons. First, George Washington would represent the country's birth. Second, Thomas Jefferson, who nearly doubled its size with the Louisiana Purchase, stood for its westward expansion and growth. Third, Theodore Roosevelt, the overseer of the Panama Canal, was a symbol of economic prosperity. Last but not least, Abraham Lincoln was selected for having fought to preserve a segregated nation at war with itself. These vital moments in time are considered some of the most outstanding achievements of American values. Though the U.S. government officially labeled it complete, Borglum had tons of ideas yet to achieve. His vision was unfinished upon his death. His initial goal was to carve and blast away the mountain presidents down to their waists. It took 16 years to complete the faces and $1 million, so you can't imagine what the remainder of the project would have entailed. As the faces began to materialize on the mountain, the artist Borglum was running out of space and couldn't complete the torso as he imagined. Instead, he would think up something even better: a secret vault stored behind the faces, set to house ancient artifacts of great power. In 1938, he began blasting out a 70-foot tunnel and vault systems into the mountain for his Hall of Records. The U.S. government was unaware of its construction at first. This was by design of Borglum. You see, for 16 years, the government tried to control his art piece, trying to cut down cost and scale. The artist wouldn't have that, so upon his death, he saw an opportunity to cancel the rest of the project. It still stands as one of the most extraordinary sculptures of all time. Remember, it is essential to separate art from the artist. In other words, the work an artist produces doesn't necessarily represent the ideas presented. When Borglum died in 1941, his son Lincoln took over the project and wrapped it up as best as he could. He says of his father, "There will never be another one like him, even me. I could never produce the quality of work my father has." After the vault and tunnels were complete, Lincoln told the government the project was completed. The tunnel that Borglum and his son had constructed sat empty for decades. Then in 1998, the National Park Service placed a titanium vault on the floor, filling it with information on Mount Rushmore, the presidents whose faces were carved there, and the U.S. history behind it. Too bad they forgot to mention many of the tragedies and dark issues surrounding it. When you try to keep something a secret, it always leaves room for the why. If you give people the knowledge they desire right away, there is typically no question in motives. Because so much of its construction was shrouded in secrecy, it has to this day been subject to conspiracy and paranormal theory. This no longer secret room isn't open to the public, but has been the subject of much speculation and was depicted in many films including Richie Rich, National Treasure, and most famously in Alfred Hitchcock's film North by Northwest. These films further reinforce the secret theories. When Hitchcock asked the NPS to record for his film, they agreed, but only under particular conditions. It wouldn't be the backdrop of any violent scenes. The government was seemingly trying to evade any sort of attribution of violence with the monument, and that no actors would scale the faces at any point during filming. Hitchcock, being Hitchcock, partially kept his promise. For the sake of the film, he did whatever he wanted. He shot the film's violent final chase scene on a scaled replica, so realistic that viewers believed it was filmed at Mount Rushmore, and still brought the ire from the NPS back onto Hitchcock and the studio. The studio had no case, and the film was released as it was. In the decades since its first construction, the memorial and its surrounding naturescape have served as a flashpoint for the treatment of Native Americans throughout the country. The protests that ensue today aren't to have it deconstructed or demolished. Instead, the indigenous people just want their story told, and told correctly. Sure, it may have been a dark period of U.S. history, but we learn from our mistakes by reviewing them, not by dusting them under the rug. Tell the tale as it is. Sure, the facts of the presidents who are up there contributed to the country's expansion, but let's not forget the indigenous people from whom it was taken. Their stories are more vital to this country's formation than many celebratory holidays that citizens enjoy off work today. Why have their tales been cut from the history books? While they ignored the great things the Native Americans did, the NPS also ignored these presidents' heinous things to forever solidify their faces on the mountains. Roosevelt, for example, saw the dismantling of Indian Territory in Oklahoma. Washington and Jefferson both owned slaves. Yet despite these horrible attributes of these supposed great men, they refused to tell of those tales. It all comes down to saving face, and in this case, quite literally. If the ill behavior of perceived great men of the past is shattered, what is to come of the country upon which their ideals were built upon? Again, you must go back to history and learn from its mistakes, not hide from them. Acknowledge the wrongdoing and move forward so all humans have a more inclusive place to live. After all, many indigenous people's stories have been hidden or swept away in a violent history. Either way, as Americans, we should all look at Mount Rushmore and wonder what we can do to make it a better place to visit for all citizens of this new America. To hold on to ideals of the past despite revelatory wrongdoing is human regression, not progression. As you all know, humans can only walk through time in one direction, forward. As you can see, Mount Rushmore, though brilliant in its form and construction, is shrouded in dark tales and mystery. It's proof to not take anyone's word for anything, and that in-depth research should be conducted individually to form your own ideas. The entities that control these monuments have forever tried to hide the dark history that resulted in its construction, but it can't erase it. So open your eyes and try to see the world for what it is and what it can become with a bit of knowledge and application. If you enjoyed the video, smash that like button and don't forget to subscribe to get all our unique content delivered right to your email.